Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Now, like about a year after 3rd edition had first come out, it was around the time I just kind of dipped out of the gaming hobby in general for, most of a decade, like 8 or 9 years. It's not like I was counting. But, so I missed out, on the original release of Eberron, and had never really picked up much about that setting and stuff. And got back into gaming because 4th edition had come out and had these lovely little commercials with like graph paper style graphics and animations, which just really did a great job at like zinging you right in the nostalgias. So, out of curiosity, I go and I pick up the 4th edition rule books. I tried running it a couple of times, but I really just didn't like how video gamey the rules felt, and like just how attached they were to miniatures and dungeon crawling. So I was rather happy when the 5th edition first came out, and I'm still generally satisfied with it. It's kind of more the people surrounding it and working on the inside there that are kind of starting to raise my ire. But even then, I still find it a functional, potentially fun game, as long as you just listen to yourself about what you want to do with it instead of listening to what other people are telling you to do with it. And so I kind of missed out on exactly where the Dragonborn came from. They were one of the core player races in the 4th edition player's handbook, and then on to being a core race in this one. I want to say they came from Eberron. Eberron had an almost Palladium-esque amount of races available in that setting. And since I wasn't around then, I'm not exactly clear, but I'm under the impression that Dragonborn originally came from the Eberron setting. And by making them a generic core race, that's caused, some ripple effects. The weird ways they've tried to write them into the Forgotten Realms setting by having some contrivance that during one of those sundering events or whatever they're called, like a little chunk of an alternate world that had a Dragonborn kingdoms got rifted in to replace, some other native human kingdom from around Thay's, area of the world map. I don't really see how well they work in Kryn. The way they're written is so that once upon a time back in whatever ancient first age, during whatever, they're one of the first civilizations. They're up there with the first elves and the first dwarves, but in whatever war between elves and dragons and giants that had happened back then, the Dragonborn were the ones that actually got fucked the hardest. Their numbers decimated, their cities destroyed, and their race scattered to the winds. Which is, kind of okay. It's like the Kwai Chang Kang race built into it. Seemingly maybe a little redundant, since there's also stuff like half-dragons and draconians already out there in the books. But okay, when I first saw them, I kind of, I don't know, this is kind of cheese dick, kind of a character. Like, who's this going to appeal to? It's going to appeal to power gamers who want to have a pretense around them that they're being somehow noble and virtuous by being the biggest and strongest and most powerful and undefeatable character ever kind of types. They seem almost built to be paladins. And I don't know. I've tried to come up with some own ways in my own kind of homebrew type settings and stories to try to kind of better fit them into things, while not erasing or negating any of that kind of material that's in the printed backstory of them. I just advanced the timeline a little bit further on. My idea for using them is the cult of Io. For ages, the Dragonborn loyal to Tiamat and Dragonborn loyal to Bahamut have not liked each other, but some sort of event has happened in the last century or so, which has brought the Knights of Bahamut and the Cult of the Dragon, aka the Cult of Tiamat, together, and they're kind of creating a dual cult of Io. They're not fully merged. The Knights are still Knights. The Tiamat cultists are serving as the priesthood of us, but they're all dedicated on the idea that if they can gain enough of a following, They'll be able to, like, manifest Bahamut and Tiamat and then get them to reemerge to bring the god, the dragon god, the original dragon creator god, Io, back to life somehow. And so, at first, they're kind of out on the edge of the map. Player characters who come from them should be kind of given some, like hush-hush information to try to keep to themselves about what's coming. Non-Dragonborn player characters and player character groups will maybe first encounter like a couple of Dragonborn monks or a Dragonborn scholar in town, maybe with like a kobold servant. Maybe a couple of roaming Dragonborn knights who are seemingly helpful. And in all cases, seemingly like, oh, what potential great new allies we have here. Not realizing that, like, back further east, the Dragonborn have been basically zipping across the land and kind of a crusade/inquisition kind of thing where they're unifying both the dragon cults and basically pulling in all the other peoples around them that have any kind of like symbolic connection with dragons. Various human tribes and ethnicities that themselves worship Bahamut and Tiamat are kind of brought in to the Empire of Io. Kobolds are being like recruited in large numbers, and the Dragonborn themselves, because of this weird fusion of trying to balance between these two cult groups. My idea prior to Fizzband's Treasury of Dragons coming out is that the Dragonborn who belong to the cult of Io would start to change so that their scales would have both a chromatic and a metallic aspect, where the lead war priest of the cult of Io would be a Dragonborn dude with like the gold underscales like a gold dragon, but like maybe the green backing and arm scales and head scales of a green dragon kind of thing. You'd have kind of show that there's this emergent duality amongst them kind of a thing. The reintroduction of crystal dragons and that you can have crystal dragonborn kind of upends a lot of that. So I'm not really quite sure how to revise that yet, aside to just pull that out of it and just have Dragonborn be Dragonborn. Period. In many ways, the crystal dragons kind of upset the chromatic metallic balance of good and evil, but I guess use that the way you want to. And so yeah, like to me, like the Dragonborn are like a looming future threat. After all this time, they're like on the cusp of becoming the next big empire again. They should be presented in such a way that player characters think, oh my god, these guys are helpful. We can get these guys to come help with our mission. They can bring in some firepower, so to say, and backing. Except that over time they should notice that, like when more Dragonborn start to enter their region, that at first they're seemingly focused on rooting out any little hidden cells of Cult of the Dragon that they haven't yet absorbed into the new Cult of Io. And that's when you start to have your players notice that the somewhat harsh tactics, like they're capturing people, torturing them, making them confess. If they refuse to convert to the new Church of Io and they just remain loyal to the original cult of Tiamat, then they're being burned at a stake or crucified or whatever particular super harsh medieval punishment of choice that you would like to use. And it kind of like the slow dawning on your player characters that they've kind of invited a worse type of evil, because this is now the evil that thinks it's good and is now in their land, and as they solidify their power, they're going to start picking on the other cults that are not even dragon related and all that kind of good stuff. Also, I feel especially because I like to include kobolds in that mix, it kind of frames kobolds as the dragon lineage version of the gnomes and halflings, kind of a thing going on. They're the small race for that line, and I kind of find it ironic to actually end up having them be like the source of a lot of technological innovations, like beyond that, even what like gnomes and dwarves have been producing. If I'm going to introduce guns into the D&D setting, I'd have the kobolds be the one who invented them. Just a small army of thousands of kobolds with tiny little rifles. You can do some damage with that, and partly justified that the idea that kobolds have been kind of just like living pretty, primitive lives and still doing a lot of interesting little technological stuff anyway, in terms of like, developing artificial wings for some of them, or all their intricate traps. They're not dumb. They just uneducated and starving. And so, under the guidance of the Dragonborn and the Empire of Io, you have a couple generations of kobolds emerge who've been fed and educated, and so therefore, even though they're still themselves the leaps of innovation that and invention that they're able to come up with, like jump exponentially compared to earlier. In fact, it could also be a interesting and unexpected twist for a new origin point for reintroducing Spelljammer technology into your setting or something like that. And so, yeah, villains in the background. Optionally, the thing I was doing in my setting was that, the primary advisor to the chief crusader knight of the Empire of Io was just this mysterious lady called the sorceress, who you just kind of just imply that she's just a human sorceress with the dragon blood option. But what she actually is Tiamat, who her way of escaping Avernus was to convince like another god or something to grant her a wish to turn her mortal, and that way she would be able to get out of Avernus, because then she's no longer Tiamat, so she's no longer bound to the top layer. And now her actual real secret plan is to use the Empire of Io, the Knights of Io, and the Cult of the Dragon to locate the bones of Bahamut, and then use those to re-empower herself so she can regain her original form as Tiamat. Because something about the wish curse that put her in this body also kind of keeps her locked in it. And so it's all just a big giant Tiamat storyline that's, maybe a bit more surprising than like just telling people openly what's going on. You can trick the players into like actually working with these people. What if the player characters end up joining? They decide they like the Empire of Io and the Knights of Bahamut, and they want to help them find some ancient temple of Bahamut and all that kind of stuff, because they might buy into the idea that like, oh, maybe peace can be found on Earth if we could just bring the two dragon gods back together and restore the balance and yada yada yada, only to then find out that they were been duped into working for like one of the most evil and famous goddesses of D&D history. I don't know. I mean, that's just how I like to think. You'll have your own ideas and all that kind of stuff. So, but hopefully you might find something here a wee bit inspirational. I don't know. I just feel if we're gonna have the Dragonborn in there, like they should be a bigger presence. Like they're pretty buff race, even with the stuff they've done in 5th edition to kind of balance them out more, where they're not so like automatically going to get wings and all that kind of shit. I feel like they should have more of an impact on the setting, and the way they've been integrated in many of the established settings that Dungeons and Dragons has done is like, I don't know. I haven't felt entirely satisfied with it. So at least if you're doing a homebrew thing, you construct something that also plays into the idea that like we're not familiar. Even now we're still kind of not familiar as a gaming culture with having Dragonborn in our D&D settings. I mean, anytime you go back and look at any of the old D&D stuff, not a whiff of them at all. They didn't even exist. They were just a figment in their father's eye or something like that. And so like there should be a way to like both play into the idea that they're old, but also like they're a new threat. They're a forgotten thing from the past that's now returning, and because they're so ill remembered, the nature of the threat that they pose is kind of like over everyone's heads, and it takes some time for the players to realize that oh, this was a mistake. We should not have allied with these people and help them, bring them into our little starting, adventure area. Because, now they're going to persecute everyone in the city and burn them alive if they don't convert, ourselves included. And yeah, and then have kobolds as kind of like a sidekick race to them. And these are just like cleaner, better dressed, better fed, more knowledgeable kobolds. And then like a third tier of like human subjects, human sorcerers with dragon blood, and just like various small human cultural groups that are, you know, are either already worshiping one of the dragon gods or somehow have some belief that they're a descendant of dragons. You know, you can also have your occasional half dragons in the thing. Whether or not to include draconians, since Fizban's Treasury of Dragons kind of makes draconians just more of a generic, a thing that tyrants occasionally do with dragon eggs to create an army kind of vibe. I don't know. I mean, that's new, so I don't really know whether or not to incorporate that or not. That could be maybe some like second tier, like once the characters have gotten deeper into this plot line, then they might discover that the evil priesthood is actually, you know, breeding draconians or any of that kind of stuff. A lot of that depends on like how prevalent dragons are from the get-go. I tend to feel that like modern D&D, especially Forgotten Realms, is too dragon saturated. I mean, there shouldn't be a cow or a sheep left in all of Faerun with that many dragons living around every corner. So I tend to kind of like, I don't want to erase them from the setting, but I try to Saruman them by meaning that like you don't really see them very much, but they get mentioned a lot. There's a weight in the setting, a shadow cast by them that's greater than the actual amount of appearance size you actually get out of the thing. And so if they're all kind of off into the corners of the world, then like, I don't know, like it seems a contrivance to be able to get that many dragon eggs to actually be able to do a draconian army. So I'm not really sure if they should be fit into any of that Empire of Io stuff at all. But I don't know. You can tell me what you think about it all in the comments below. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and all that groovy stuff. And stay waspinated.